I never thought I'd be the kind of person who believes in hauntings, or stalkers, or whatever this was. But when it happens to you, it's different. You don't believe, you just survive. It started in November, after my breakup. I was 28, living alone for the first time, and I'd found a cheap rental house outside Manchester. 2 bedrooms, big kitchen, lots of old wood. The landlord said it had been empty for a while, but he seemed eager to rent it out quickly, even lowered the price when I hesitated. The first few days were normal. The kind of normal that makes you think, okay, maybe I can start over. I unpacked, set up my desk, even started cooking again. But by the end of the first week, I began to notice things. Not the obvious haunted house stuff, just little things. My phone charger moved from the floor to the table. My keys turned up in the fridge. One morning I found the kitchen window cracked open when I swore I'd locked it. I told myself it was exhaustion. Maybe I was doing things on autopilot. The breakup had been rough, after all. Then came the first knock. It was late, maybe 11:30 p.m., and raining hard. I was watching Netflix, trying to stay awake, when I heard it from the back of the house, 3 slow knocks on the back door. Knock, dot, knock, dot, knock, dot. I froze. The house backed onto a small forest. No street lights, no neighbors in sight. At first, I thought maybe it was the wind, or a branch. But no, it was too distinct. To heavy dot I waited. After about a minute, I got up and walked toward the kitchen. The sound of the rain got louder, the air colder. I peered through the small glass window on the back door. Nothing. Just the black garden beyond the patio light. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds before I heard it again. Knock, dot, knock, dot, knock. The same rhythm. Slow. Deliberate. Who's there? I called out. My voice sounded weak, like it belonged to someone else. No answer. I waited again, then went to bed with every light on. The next morning, I found something strange on the outside of the door. 3 wet, muddy handprints. Not full palms, more like someone had pressed only their fingertips against the glass, dragging them downward. I cleaned it off, told myself it was vandals, maybe some teenagers. But it bothered me all day. The prints were too high up, like the person who made them was unusually tall. That night, I double-checked all the locks before bed. Even pushed a chair under the doorknob, just to be sure. But at 1:14 a.m., I woke up to the same sound. Knock, dot, knock, dot, knock. I didn't move. I lay there, heart racing, staring at the ceiling. Knock, knock, knock. I couldn't tell if it was the front door or the back this time. The sound seemed to travel through the house, deep, hollow, like it came from everywhere at once. Then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my cheap motion camera I'd set up in the kitchen earlier that day, facing the back door. Motion detected, 1:14 a.m. I opened the app. The feed showed the kitchen, dark, grainy still. Then, from the bottom of the frame, a figure moved past. Just a blur. Tall, thin, fast. The clip was only 6 seconds long, but my blood went cold. I rewound it, frame by frame. There, right before it ended, the figure paused at the back door and turned. Even through the blur, you could tell it wasn't right. The head was tilted too far, the shoulders uneven. The face was wrong, distorted like the camera couldn't focus on it. Then, as if it knew it was being watched, it reached out toward the lens, and the feed cut to static. I barely slept. The next morning, I called the landlord. "Has anyone had issues here before?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "What kind of issues? Like break-ins or trespasses?" "No, nothing like that. But—" He stopped. "You said you're hearing knocking." "Yeah," a pause. "Sometimes houses make noises when they settle, especially in the cold. Don't worry about it." He hung up before I could say more. That night, the knocks came again. Only this time, they didn't stop at 3. They came in long, and even bursts, hard, slow pounding that shook the wood. I ran to the kitchen with my phone recording. "Who the hell are you?" I shouted. Silence. Then, faintly, a whisper through the door. "Let me in." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't even human sounding. The voice was dry, cracked, like someone forcing air through their throat after not speaking for years. I called the police. 2 officers showed up 20 minutes later, walked the perimeter, and found nothing. Not even footprints in the mud. Could be some local kids messing about. One of them said. I showed him the video. He frowned, looked at his partner. "That's weird, but it's not clear enough to ID anyone." They left soon after. At that point, I started sleeping with a kitchen knife beside the bed. Over the next few days, things got worse. Objects moved again. Not small things this time. The chair I used to block the door ended up across the room. My phone charger was plugged into the wall even though I'd left it in another room. One evening, when I got home from work, I found the back door wide open. No signs of a break-in. Nothing missing. On the kitchen counter sat my phone, recording. The video was 2 minutes long. In it, you could see the door slowly creak open on its own. Then a faint hand, impossibly pale, reached in, touched the counter, and disappeared. At the end of the video, the phone was lifted and turned around. For a split second, you could see the person holding it, tall, thin, eyes black. Then the feed cut off. I checked my phone's metadata. The recording was made at 3:12 a.m. I had been asleep upstairs. That night, I dreamed of knocking. In the dream, I was standing in front of the same door, but this time, I was the one knocking. When it opened, I saw myself standing inside, eyes black, face expressionless, and I said, "Let me in." When I woke up, my phone screen was on. The voice memo app had been recording. There was silence for the first 30 seconds. Then, 3 knocks. Knock, dot, knock, dot, knock. Then a whisper. "You're already inside. I tried to leave that morning, but my car wouldn't start. The battery was fine. It just wouldn't turn over." I called a friend, Jamie, to come pick me up. When he arrived, I showed him everything. The videos, the messages, even the scratches I found on the back door. He thought it was a prank, until he checked the footage metadata. "Mate," he said quietly, "these timestamps are reversed. The videos, they're not being recorded. They're being played backwards." He showed me. The clock in each clip ran in reverse, which meant that whatever was on camera had been recorded before I turned the system on. "How is that possible?" I asked. He just shook his head. We went back into the kitchen. I opened the back door to show him the handprints. Only this time, there were 3. There were dozens, covering the glass, all facing inward. I left that night and stayed at Jamie's flat. He made me promise not to go back alone. 2 days. Later, I got a call from the landlord. "Can you come collect your belongings? I'm selling the property." Selling. Why? He sighed. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. When I arrived, the police were there again. The door had been smashed from the inside. The officer in charge told me they'd found something. Behind the kitchen wall, a sealed crawl space. Inside, there was a pile of old, decayed clothing, a camera, and bones. Not animal bones, human, small, like a child's, the landlord told me, in private. That family had once lived there in the 1960s. The father disappeared. The mother and daughter were found dead in the forest behind the property, drowned in mud after a landslide. The house had been abandoned for decades. He said the father's body was never recovered. That night, I was back at Jamie's. We had a few beers to calm down. Weren't we? My phone buzzed. A new video notification from my old security system. Motion detected, 201A. I stared at the screen. Jamie said, Mate, you didn't leave the camera on, did you? I hadn't. I'd unplugged everything. The video opened to a grainy view of the back door again. Someone was standing there, tall, thin, tilting its head. It lifted a hand and pointed directly at the lens. Then, slowly, it raised the other hand. In it, it was holding a phone. My phone. The screen showed a live view of me and Jamie watching the video. Then the feed went black. I moved to a new city after that. Got a new number, new job, new everything. But the video file still follows me. Every few weeks, it reappears on my desktop. I delete it. It comes back each time. The name changes. First backdoor _01. Then letmine _05. Now, the latest one just says inside _13. The timestamp is always tomorrow. I used to think living alone was scary. Now I know. It's worse when you realize you're not. Back in 2019, I moved to Birmingham for a university. Rent was expensive. So I found a listing for a 2-bedroom flat shared with someone named Eli. The ad said he was quiet, worked nights, and kept to himself. Sounded ideal. The place was old but cozy. Creaky floors, fading wallpaper, the faint smell of dust and cigarette smoke that never really went away. I moved in on a rainy Saturday. Eli wasn't there, but he'd left a note on the counter. Welcome. My room's upstairs. Please don't go up there. I work nights, so I sleep during the day. He seemed reasonable. We all value privacy. The first week went smoothly. He was polite, paid rent on time, never made noise. I'd hear him come in round 3 or 4 a.m. Footsteps creaking above my ceiling, sometimes a cupboard opening, sometimes muffled humming. It was oddly comforting, knowing someone else was there, even if we barely spoke. One morning, though, I found a plate of food on the kitchen counter. Pancakes, perfectly stacked, still warm. I assumed Eli made them for himself and forgot. But when I texted him, he replied almost instantly, "Not mine. You can have them." That night, I heard something new, dragging. A long, slow scraping across the ceiling. I stared up from my bed, trying to imagine what it was. Maybe furniture. Maybe he was rearranging things. But the sound went on for us at round 2 a.m. I finally got up, grabbed my broom handle, and banged on the ceiling. The dragging stopped. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then, faintly, came 3 slow knocks from directly above my bed. Knock, knock, knock. I laughed it off, even texted him jokingly. Late night home improvement. No response. The next morning, I went to class, came home, and found something strange again. The front door was unlocked. On the kitchen table sat a mug full of black coffee, steam still rising. But I hadn't made any. I waited round for Eli to come down, to maybe laugh it off. He didn't, in fact. I realized I hadn't seen him in days. His room upstairs had no visible door from the hallway, just a staircase that curved out of sight, ending in a small landing. Every time I looked up there, something about it made me uneasy. The light never reached that corner. That night, I heard the dragging again, then footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving toward the stairs that led down to me. I froze, listening. The steps stopped halfway down, then, whispering, too soft to make out, but close enough that I could feel the vibration in the walls. When I finally got up enough, courage to call out, "Eli," the whispering stopped. Then, after a moment, I heard him speak, clear, calm, almost amused. Didn't I say not to come upstairs? I didn't move. My throat went dry. "I'm not upstairs," I said. There was silence. Then, the sound of retreating footsteps, back to his room, the next morning. I noticed something new. The hallway light was on. I never left it on, but it had that faint yellow flicker like it had been burning all night. And on the top step, something was sitting there, a plate, with pancakes still warm. I finally decided to ask the landlord about Eli. He looked confused when I mentioned the name. "There's no Eli on the lease," he said. "You're the only tenant." I told him there was someone living upstairs, that I'd seen the door and heard him moving. The landlord frowned, then said he'd come check. When he arrived later that day, he went straight up the stairs, while I waited below, shaking. A minute passed, then two. Finally, he called down, "There's nothing up here." I didn't believe him until I went up myself. The staircase led to a small landing and a wall. No door, no second room, nothing. Just old wallpaper covering a sealed archway. The landlord looked pale. This used to lead to the attic. He said quietly, "We closed it off years ago. There was an incident." "What kind of incident?" He hesitated. "The previous tenant, a man named Eli. He passed away. In 2015, he hung himself in the attic after losing his job. I couldn't breathe." "When did you say this happened?" "4 years ago," he said. "The space has been sealed ever since. That night, I slept on the couch, lights on. Every sound made my heart race. Sometime round 3 a.m., I woke to the faint smell of cigarettes. Then footsteps, coming down the stairs. The air went cold. I could hear breathing, slow, heavy, from the hallway. I turned my head toward the sound and saw it. A shape, faint and grey, standing in the glow of the living light. It wasn't solid, more like smoke, but with eyes that shimmered faintly, as if reflecting a light that wasn't there. It just stood there, watching. I whispered, "Eli." The figure tilted its head, the same way I'd seen shadows move on the ceiling. Then it spoke, in that calm, amused voice. "You shouldn't have come upstairs." I blinked, and it was gone. The next day, the landlord came back with a contractor to unseal the attic wall. Inside, there was dust, cobwebs, and a single chair in the corner, directly above where my bed had been. On the floor beside it, half buried in debris, was a plate, with a stack of rotted pancakes. I moved out that evening. I don't care if anyone believes this. Sometimes, when I stay in new places now, I'll still hear that faint dragging above the ceiling, that slow, steady creak of footsteps. I tell myself it's just an old building settling. But every once in a while, I wake up in the middle of the night and smell cigarette smoke. And from somewhere above, I swear I hear him whisper, "Breakfast's ready." The mirror in apartment 9, when I first moved into apartment 9, I thought I'd locked out. It was cheap, fully furnished, and right in the middle of Edinburgh, close enough to the university that I could walk. The only catch, the landlord said, was that it came as is. That didn't bother me. Until I saw the mirror. It stood in the hallway, full length, framed in black wood carved with strange floral patterns. It wasn't attached to the wall, just leaning, old, heavy, and too large for the space. The glass was slightly warped, so reflection stretched a little if you stood too close. I tried to move it on the first night, but when I touched the frame, I felt this faint vibration, like static under my fingertips. It left a tingling sensation that lasted for hours. So I left it there. The apartment was otherwise perfect, small but warm, with a view of cobblestone streets and pubs that glowed like amber at night. I told myself the mirror gave the place character. But by the end of the first week, I started noticing odd things. When I passed it, sometimes the reflection didn't move exactly with me. Just a split second of delay, so subtle I thought I was imagining it. Once, I swore I saw my reflection blink when I didn't. Another time, after coming home late, I walked by it and thought I saw someone else in the glass, standing behind me, half-shadowed. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. When I looked again, my reflection was normal. I told myself it was stress. Exams were coming up, sleep was rare, and the building was old, full of creaks and weird drafts. Still, I started avoiding the hallway after dark. One night, round 2 a.m., I was in bed scrolling my phone when I heard something crash on glass. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hall. The mirror was on the floor, unbroken but face down, as if it had fallen gently. No shards, no damage, just lying there like someone had lowered it. When I lifted it back up, I froze. There was a handprint on the inside of the glass small pale, smudged, as if pressed from the other side. I couldn't breathe. I touched it. The print was warm. I backed away, turned off the light, and went straight to my room. I didn't sleep. The next morning, the print was gone. A few days later, I came home from class to find something new. The mirror had moved again, this time tilted slightly toward the kitchen. On the floor, a note had been slipped under the door. No return address, just typed words on yellow paper. Do not face it toward any doors. Ever, no signature. I threw the note away. But that night, when I walked past the mirror, my reflection looked wrong again. It was smiling. I wasn't. The smile was subtle, lips just curling at the corners, but unmistakable. I blinked, stepped closer, heart racing. It stopped smiling. Now it looked normal. Then it exhaled. I heard it, a breath. From inside the glass. The following evening, I invited my friend Aaron over. I didn't tell him everything, just that something felt weird. He laughed, said mirrors freaked people out because of peripheral illusions. Then he looked straight into it and said, "See, nothings." He stopped mid-sentence. His expression changed, like he'd seen something. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer, just backed away. "Did you just go behind me?" "No," I said. I hadn't moved. He swallowed hard. Someone did. When I looked in the glass, there was someone else standing behind him, a figure tall, barely visible, like fog shaped into a person. Aaron spun round. Nothing there. When he looked back at the mirror, the figure was closer. He swore, grabbed his jacket, and left. I didn't see him again for weeks. I covered the mirror with a sheet that night. It didn't help. Round 3 a.m., I woke to a soft scraping sound, like nails dragging on wood. It was coming from the hallway. I turned on the light, but the sound didn't stop. When I peeked out, the sheet had fallen off. The mirror was uncovered again, facing my bedroom door. I froze. There was movement inside the glass. Not my reflection, not anything solid. Just dark shapes shifting slowly, like something breathing behind smoke. And faintly, beneath the sound of scraping, I heard whispering. Dozens of overlapping voices, too quiet to understand. Then one word broke through, clear and cold. Closer. I ran back into my room, slammed the door, and stayed awake until sunrise. In daylight, everything looked normal again. I almost convinced myself it was sleep paralysis, until I noticed the mirror's reflection didn't show my room properly anymore. If I stood in front of it, the hallway behind me in the reflection was longer than it really was, extending into darkness where there should have been a wall. And sometimes, far down that stretched hallway, I'd see movement. Something walking toward me. I called the landlord that afternoon, demanded he take it away. He sounded uneasy. "You found it still there?" he asked. "Yes." "Why?" A long pause. "That mirror was left by a tenant from years ago. A woman. He hesitated. She disappeared. No one knows how. Police found the mirror propped against the wall. Her fingerprints were inside the glass." I hung up. I was shaking so bad I nearly dropped my phone. That night, I decided to get rid of it myself. I wrapped it in an old blanket, hauled it down to the courtyard, and left it by the trash bins. When I came back upstairs, the hallway felt instantly lighter. The air warmer. I slept for the first time in weeks. The next morning, the mirror was back, leaning against the same wall. But now there was something new written across it, in the condensation on the glass. "Where did you go?" That was the night I left apartment 9. Packed a single bag. Didn't even shut the door. I stayed with friends until I could move. A month later, the landlord called me again. They'd rented the place to a new tenant. He asked if I'd left any furniture behind, because apparently the mirror was missing. I told him I hadn't touched it since that night. He said, "That's strange. The new tenant swears she found it in the living room this morning, leaning against the door. It's been 3 years since I left, and I still think about that mirror. Sometimes, when I pass reflective glass in shops or train stations, I catch a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. A stretch of hallway, a shifting shadow, a smile that isn't mine. And every time I blink, the reflection is gone, but my breath fogs the glass for a second longer than it should. Like something inside is breathing back."